The mid to late 2000s were a weird time for the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. In 2005, we got Shadow the Hedgehog for PS2, Xbox, and Gamecube, which... pretty much speaks for itself.
Where's that damn fourth Chaos Emerald?
Then, infamously in 2006, we got Sonic the Hedgehog, a game set to reboot and revitalize the series on the then next-gen hardware, which did anything but that, if we're putting it lightly. Despite this, however, we got Sonic Unleashed in 2008 and Sonic Colors in 2010, two games that are still considered to be some of the best in the series even today. Not to mention, we also had the handheld spin-offs and even Olympic crossovers with a certain Red Plumber. To say Sonic was a mixed bag during this time is an understatement, and a huge part of that was the Sonic Storybook sub-series on the Wii. These two games are responsible for introducing a whole generation of Sonic fans into the franchise, thanks to both the massive success and casual appeal of the Wii getting it into many people's homes. With the success of the movies, recent release of Sonic Origins, and a new 3D entry on the horizon, I thought it'd be fun to check out this sub-series and introduce myself and many others to the Blue Fuck himself. Released in 2007, Sonic and the Secret Rings was released onto the world's most popular white brick, jump-starting the Storybook series as it would later be called. While it was praised by many critics upon release, nowadays the general consensus of the game is lukewarm at best to negative at worst. I myself haven't touched the game since my first playthrough some odd years ago, so I'm interested to see which camp I fall in so many years later. Join me today as we take a look at the Sonic Storybook series, 15 years later, starting with Sonic and the Secret Rings.
7 rings in hand, speed through nights with beating sand. 7 rings in hand, wonders all under command. 7 rings in hand, wild with just one single hand. 7 rings in hand.
Launching in late 2006, the Wii quickly became a smash hit. Thanks to its lower price point when compared to its competitors, the Wii became one of Nintendo's fastest-selling consoles to date, and Sega wanted to cash in on the newest hot trend. Originally, Sega wanted to port Sonic 06 to the console, but the technical limitations of Nintendo's hardware made it prove more difficult than they had originally anticipated. Since the development of 06 was already going so well, they decided to split the dev team in half in order to develop a new Sonic title for the Wii, which speaks volumes about the quality of both games looking back on it now. Originally unveiled as Sonic Wildfire at E3 2006, the game would later release in early 2007 under the name Sonic and the Secret Rings. Secret Rings is loosely based on the Arabian Nights, with Sonic being summoned into the storybook world by a genie named Shara to help stop an evil entity known as Eraser Jin from destroying the book world and escaping into the real world. All of the cutscenes in the game are stylized to look like a picture book, which looks nice and gives the game its own identity, and also saves a little bit of money. Because of this direction, the cutscenes can be very stilted and kind of boring to look at. Characters just kind of sit there and dump exposition on you, maybe a few zooms and pans if you're lucky. There's not a whole lot of actual movement. Thankfully, the voice acting and character writing is pretty good. Sonic is an asshole as usual, and the other characters act as you think they will, for better and for worse. Being a launch window Wii game, it's only natural that there'd be some kind of motion controls shoehorned in, and Secret Rings is no different. This game is essentially an auto-runner. Sonic moves forward automatically and you can steer him left or right using the Wii Remote. You can brake with the 1 button and you can try to back up by tilting the Wii Remote backwards, but I found that it didn't work very well at all. The game has trouble figuring out what direction you're going when moving backwards, so Sonic tends to jitter all over the place. Thankfully, you don't really need to move backwards that often, but it tends to be a pain in the ass when you do, especially in the few 2D sections the game has to offer. Jumping is also a bit different this time around. Tapping the 2 button makes Sonic do a short hop, and by holding the button you can charge a jump, which not only makes Sonic slide, but also results in a higher jump. You can also cancel a jump by pressing the 2 button again in the air, which can be used to drop down to the ground quickly or attack enemies with the proper skills. He also has the homing attack, which you can use to defeat enemies or cross large gaps. New to this game is the Soul Gauge, which you unlock about halfway through the game and allows Sonic to use 2 new moves, Speed Break and Time Break. You fill up the Soul Gauge by picking up these pearls on the ground and defeating enemies. Speed Break basically acts as a boost, while Time Break is more situational. The game tells you to use it to slow down and slip past certain obstacles, but Sonic doesn't keep his speed when you use it, so I found it very situational. The only practical use I found for it was slowing down these rotating springs in order to take a shortcut, but they're in very few levels, and by the time I found out you could even do this, I was already in the post-game. time break also puts an ugly ass filter on the screen, so I don't like using it. Unique to this game, Sonic has an experience and skill system. By completing missions and leveling up, Sonic can earn a variety of different skills, ranging from increased acceleration, homing attack range, a backflip, and so on. Each skill requires a certain amount of skill points, or SP, and you can set up to 4 different skill loadouts at a time, which is a nice addition. A consequence of this system is that Sonic starts the game out really fucking slow. It takes far too long for him to reach his maximum acceleration, meaning you have shit like this where Sonic looks like he's just speedwalking through a stage. Or down a wall. While I understand this is intentional to give the player a sense of growth as you progress through the game, which is definitely the case, you get a lot faster as the game goes on, but a lot of these skills should have just been a part of Sonic's base moveset. As it is now, you have to waste a majority of your SP just to get Sonic to a point where he's decent to control, leaving very little room to customize your build for a given mission without making substantial sacrifices. I think making skills such as the backflip, quick step, and at least one acceleration boost would have gone a long way to making the system more engaging and fun to control. Even when you can get Sonic to a playable state, the game doesn't feel built around a faster Sonic. During the end and post-game, I was constantly running off of ledges and into various hazards because I couldn't stop in time to avoid them. While it might sound rich to complain about Sonic being too fast in a Sonic game, it's a genuine issue with the game's loose and inaccurate controls. The game does have infinite lives, so you usually don't lose that much progress when you do end up dying, but it's still incredibly frustrating. I had to play most of these later stages by tiptoeing my way around the obstacles in the stage, which just isn't fun. If I had to pick a word to describe secret rings, it would be unintuitive. The game constantly asks you to be precise with your movements, which is impossible with the game's imprecise controls. It's so much of an issue that there's even messages in various levels telling you to stop in your tracks or you'll be fucked. It constantly feels like you're fighting against the game and its controls, which does not help with the game's lackluster mission structure. The game is split into 8 different worlds: Lost Prologue, Sand Oasis, Dinosaur Jungle, Evil Foundry, Levitated Ruin, Pirate Storm, Skeleton Dome, and Night Palace. Each world usually has its own gimmick or set piece. For example, Levitated Ruin has this annoying wind that pushes Sonic back while he's outside, Pirate Storm has Sonic fly through the air on a cannonball, and Night Palace has you switch between 2 areas to progress through the stage. The second of which looks really cool, I'm gonna be honest with you. Aside from the wind and Levitated Ruin, the gimmicks are usually harmless distractions for the most part. The stages themselves range from decent at best to fucking annoying at worst. Most stages are flat hallways with enemies and obstacles littered throughout the stage, and at worst they're long slogs through an environment that's frustrating to navigate with the game's controls. On a positive note, however, in a traditional Sonic fashion, the music in Secret Rings generally slaps. Not every track in the game is a winner, but almost every track is a vocal theme, and they all fit in with the aesthetic of the game. Each world has around 20 missions in total, with the first one generally being a normal get-to-the-goal mission. The rest of them have a variety of other objectives, such as defeating a certain number of enemies, collecting rings, race missions, and so on. Some missions contain these red rings called Fire Souls. Usually there's 3 in a given mission. Collecting them grants you additional XP, unlocks new skills, and cream in party mode. They're normally pretty easy to spot, although some of them are pretty dickishly placed, so I didn't bother going out of my way for them. You're ranked in each mission depending on your time. Some missions also have a score tally, but it doesn't affect your ranking. The ranks include bronze, silver, and gold medals, and getting enough of a certain medal type unlocks new skills and concept art in the game's gallery. While you don't have to play every stage in a given world to finish the game, they don't tell you what missions are needed for progression and which ones are optional. So unless you're using a guide, you'll probably have to play missions that are extremely frustrating and don't help you progress at all, such as the Dino Egg mission in Dino Jungle, meaning you can potentially waste a bunch of time on missions that aren't even fun. Each world, with the exception of Lost Prologue, has one world ring to find. These mystical artifacts each hold an emotion that's integral to the story of the Arabian Nights, such as anger or sadness, for example. Eraser Jin needs all 7 in order to escape the storybook world, which is an important detail I'll touch on later. You find each world ring by doing a variety of things. Some are found by beating bosses, while others are just found lying on the ground after seemingly random missions. This inconsistency feeds into the issue of having to play unnecessary missions, as aside from the boss missions that always have a world ring, missions containing world rings aren't marked. Speaking of the bosses, they're kind of a mixed bag. The first 2 are generic demons summoned by Eraser Jin, and you fight them both in the exact same way. Chase them down until you can hit their weak spot and deal damage. While the method of damage technically changes between each boss, they're both extremely simple and just kinda there, not particularly interesting or engaging. The Ifrit is the worst boss of the lot, and epitomizes the worst aspects of Secret Rings. On paper, the fight is really simple. You just hit the glowing lights on his fingers in order to stun him and then run up to his head to deal damage. Easy, right? First off, in order to even hit him, you have to get the Ifrit to stop and attack you. The problem with this is that if you are even an inch in front or behind him, he starts to spin around looking for you, meaning you have to either try and back up or take a full lap around the arena and just pray that he stops to attack you. Even when he's open to attack, he's constantly raining explosive barrels and lasers on top of you, which are really difficult to avoid, which wouldn't be too much of an issue except after stunning him he sinks into a pool of lava, which raises it above where the rings are, meaning if you beef a jump and can't get to a safe platform in time, you're fucked and you have to restart the entire fight. You only have to hit him like 5 times, but it's such a pain in the ass due to all the shit flying everywhere and the gimped controls. There are 2 more boss fights with Eraser Jin, but I'll save those for a bit later. For now, let's go over the main plot that's scattered all over these disconnected missions. Shortly after entering the storybook world with the help of Ring Genie Shara, Sonic runs into Eraser Jin, who sounds really fucking bored. He doesn't even want to be there.
You must be that blue rat that just got added to the story.
He gets a bit better as the game progresses, but it's really jarring to have this as his first encounter. Eraser demands that Shara bring him the 7 world rings, to which Shara claims that she would never do, not before some extremely clever foreshadowing. As punishment for her misbehavior, Eraser shoots a fire arrow at her, which Sonic heroically blocks, embedding it in his chest. Eraser tells Sonic that if he doesn't bring him the world rings before the arrow extinguishes, then he will cease to exist. Eraser then fucks off to be a dick elsewhere, and Sonic and Shara follow chase. Along the way, Sonic saves both Alibaba, played by Tails, and King Shariar, played by Eggman. While they're at it, they also come across a few of the world rings. Sonic eventually confronts Eraser in the Evil Foundry, until he summons a fire demon known as the Ifrit. The Ifrit is too strong for Sonic to take down, so he uses Time Break in order to escape and come up with a battle plan.
Sorry, but we've got to run. Don't worry, I'm sure we'll get the chance to play again real soon.
After consulting with Alibaba, Sonic and Shara go to look for his friend Sinbad, who had been captured by pirates and might be able to help them with his worldly knowledge. After slogging his way through the levitated ruin, Sonic finds and frees Sinbad, played by Knuckles, who shares his plan to weaken the Ifrit.
Whew, okay, so about the fire genie then. Why not just try splashing some water on him?
Wow, the wisdom of Sinbad of the 7 Seas, the adventurer of adventurers.
Hey, I don't see you coming up with any better ideas.
Stop it!
Sinbad clarifies by saying that Sonic could use the blue world ring that he uses to control storms in order to summon enough water to weaken the Ifrit, but the ring has been taken away by the pirates who had captured him. As they are leaving, Sonic finds the purple world ring, which has the unique property of letting him say 1 curse word.
Just touching it makes me feel like I've got a whirlpool of emotion spiraling around inside me. I can't even begin to imagine what having all 7 rings would do to someone. It might even open the gates of hell!
Before leaving to confront the pirates, Shara gives Sonic a strange orb, saying that it'll be their last resort against Eraser if things go south. Sonic and Shara eventually track down the pirates and take down their leader, earning them the water blue world ring. Using its power, Sonic is able to confront the Ifrit again, and this time weaken it enough to defeat it. Upon its defeat, however, the Ifrit drops a strange orb, which turns out to be a bomb. After barely managing to escape the castle in time, Sonic kicks the orb in the air just as it explodes, revealing it contained a world ring. Alright, now's as good a time as any to address this. As you may recall, Eraser's goal is to gather the world rings and use them to escape into the real world. You may also remember that all of the bosses we fought so far have been demons summoned by Eraser as well, all containing world rings inside of them. If that's the case, how the fuck did Eraser expect to gather them all if his demons had most of them the whole time? Did he know they were in there? Another issue is that apparently Shara can't even touch the rings. Heck, it's even stated that Sonic's the only one who can touch them.
I can't even touch the ring.
Looks like I'm the only one that can touch them. I bet you it's because I'm not from this world. Does that mean these rings aren't from this world either?
So in that case, 1, how did Sinbad use them to control storms if he can't even touch them? And 2, how did Eraser plan to gather the rings if he couldn't even touch them? Is it just Shara who can't touch them? It's never explained, and it just makes Eraser look like a dumbass for trying to kill Sonic if he's the only one that can gather the rings for him. The plot clearly needed another draft or two. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Anyway, after defeating the Ifrit, Shara suggested they go see King Solomon in the Skeleton Dome, as he was responsible for sealing away the evil spirits years ago. So if the spirit is still around, something must have happened to him. After navigating the most boring stage in the game, Sonic eventually stumbles upon what appears to be an empty throne room.
It looks like we might be a little late.
I should say so!
Whoa!
King Solomon tells them that Eraser had sent the 40 thieves resurrected as spirits to attack him, which has scattered his bones across the Skeleton Dome and are still wreaking havoc. Even though they look pretty inactive to me, but I digress. After taking care of the spirits and retrieving the king's bones, Sonic comes across another of the world rings and then reports back to Solomon. Solomon tells Sonic that he can use the White World Ring to get into Eraser's base of operations, the Night Palace, but also warns him of Eraser's increasing strength. With no time to lose, Sonic heads into the Night Palace to finish Eraser once and for all. Before starting Night Palace, you're greeted with this really strange CG cutscene. It shows Sonic approaching the Night Palace and shows Eraser spawning, I guess, ready to confront Sonic. Aw, look how proud he is of that pose. He must have practiced it for like 3.5 hours. I'm so happy for him. The cutscene itself is fine on its own. The thing that gets me is the ending. It just fucking stops awkwardly and then moves on like nothing even happened. It's great. Upon entering the Night Palace, the flame on Sonic's chest weakens, taking some of his strength with him. With no time to lose and the end in sight, Sonic pushes through the walls and portals of the palace, finally confronting the man himself, Eraser Jin.
Ugh! It's the blue rat again!
Hey! Looks like I'm running a bit low here. Think you could top me off?
Have you brought the 7 world rings?
Well, you see, you should really just look for them yourself.
His boss fight is actually really good. Unlike the Ifrit boss, it feels like it was built with the game's whack controls in mind. While it's similar to the first 2 bosses in that you're constantly chasing Eraser, the difference is that instead of closing in to attack him, he closes in to attack you, so you have to dodge his attacks and find an opening in them to hit him. He also has this attack where he waits for a bit and then charges at you, which while it's easy to avoid, sometimes he waits way too long to attack you. Like I could make a sandwich in the time that he takes to attack me here. It would be a shitty sandwich, but the point still stands.
Come, Sonic!
It's a very simple fight. The only thing that changes is the speed at which the attacks come out, but that's fine. It's not boring or infuriating like the others, so it's amazing by comparison. Also, the music fucking slaps.
No! This isn't possible!
Alrighty, Razor, give up! You've lost!
After a thorough ass beating, Eraser escapes behind a locked door where Sonic can't reach him.
That door. What is it?
I have an idea. Watch this. Open sesame! Oh, it didn't work.
Luckily for him, the door can be opened with all 7 world rings.
When the 7 rings that control the worlds are gathered, the portal between worlds shall open. We've got the 7 world rings. This must be the door that they open.
Unfortunately for Sonic, he forgot that he only had 6 of the 7 world rings, and before he can go look for the last one, the flame on his chest dies out. As the credits roll, Sonic can be heard screaming, dying a slow, painful death in front of the door. Nah, I'm just kidding. The credits do actually roll here. Sonic is a fucking liar though, because he doesn't have all of the world rings. You can't get them until you beat Eraser, so I have no idea why he even says it. After spacewalking for a bit, Sonic finds the last world ring, and he decides to ask Shara how she even knows Eraser. You know, for some last minute foreshadowing before the final boss. Shara reveals that Eraser is the genie from the story of Aladdin, who was imprisoned in his lamp for some unknown misdeeds, until he granted the wishes of 1,000 people. By the time he was freed from the lamp, he had developed a newfound hatred for both the humans who had imprisoned him and the stories that his fate had been written into. Damn, sucks to be him. Anyway, Sonic unlocks the door and confronts Eraser one final time.
You just don't give up, do you?
Eraser tells Sonic that Mom said it was his turn on the 7 world rings, but Sonic is playing an online game so he can't pause or quit. Suddenly, to the shock of literally no one, Shara tries to give the world rings to Eraser.
Shara? What?
I must.
Shara, stop! You can't do this! Think about what will happen!
I'm sorry. I have no choice. I just want to be back with him.
Sonic quickly makes a wish on his ring, asking Shara to do what she really thinks is right, which causes Shara to collapse due to her conflicting emotions. Eraser takes the opportunity to seize the world rings and start the ritual that frees him from the storybook world.
The 7 hearts that make up the stories. These are the 7 world rings that bind these pages together.
What?
But the life of the collector of the rings shall be offered up in sacrifice as the key for that control. I offer up your life, Blue Hedgehog.
Shara sacrifices herself for Sonic, and despite his best efforts to revive her, she dies in his arms. Unfortunately for Eraser, the botched ritual sends the world rings into a frenzy, transforming him into the aftermath of my trips to Taco Bell. Before he can kill Sonic, 3 of the world rings fly out of Eraser and into Sonic, allowing him to harness the power of Hot Topic and transform into Darkspine Sonic.
We've got to stop him! Shara! Please! Let me your power!
The final boss is just kind of okay. You fly around an empty void trying to collect rings and avoid attacks, all while shaking the Wii remote in order to use Speed Break and knock back certain attacks to stun him. After that, you can close in and slap him around a bit, rinse and repeat until he's dead. The fight is pretty simple, but I really like how edgy Sonic is during this fight. His voice gets deeper while in this Darkspine state. It sounds like the Werehog from Unleashed now that I think about it. I love it.
Your tale is finished, Eraser! Next time, try writing a better story!
While the fight is pretty bland, what sells it for me is the track that plays in the background, 7 Rings in Hand. It's a great song, though I can't help but feel it would have more of an impact here if it wasn't played every 3 seconds in the mission select and result screens. After getting his shit rocked for the second time, Eraser reverts to his normal form, vowing that he'll have his revenge on Sonic. But this time, Sonic has a trick up his sleeve.
I shall not be defeated. If you defeat me, I will simply return again and again. I am immortal. I cannot be vanquished. That can't be. That's the...
Using Eraser's lamp, which was apparently the orb thing Shara gave it to him earlier in the game, Sonic forces... Oh god, I can't escape it.
Together!
Sonic forces the Eraser to grant him 3 wishes. 1. Bring Shara back to life. 2. Restore the storybook world to its original state. And 3rd...
My 3rd wish! Eraser Jin, you shall live out the rest of time trapped inside your lamp as you were in days of old!
The world is mine! I cannot be denied by that filthy rat! Why?
I told you, I'm not a rat! I'm a hedgehog!
Despite having defeated Eraser for good, Shara is still sad to lose the one that she loved. So, Sonic asks Shara for one more favor.
Shara, will you grant me one more wish? I wish for a mountain of handkerchiefs. Now, just let yourself cry, as much as you need to. You'll have plenty of handkerchiefs to help you through it.
Ugh. Anyway, that concludes Sonic and the Secret Rings. During the real credits, Sonic and Shara just straight up kill Eraser, and the game hints that there are more adventures between Sonic, Alibaba, and Sinbad, but I couldn't be bothered to play any more missions to see them. While this game can be fun under very specific circumstances, the game is fundamentally plagued by bad level design and unintuitive controls, making it a chore to play. While the music and presentation are certainly appealing, the lackluster story and padded mission structure leave a lot to be desired. I can't see myself coming back to this game much in the future. While Secret Rings was praised at the time of release for being the most stable game in the series around the time, most of the time anyway, nowadays people generally look upon it negatively, mostly due to its controls and structure. The game sold well enough to warrant a sequel. This is a storybook series after all. So let's look at the next entry, one I happen to regard very fondly, as it's one of the first Sonic games I ever played, and the one that made me fall in love with the series proper. Two years after the release of Secret Rings, its successor, Sonic and the Black Knight, was released in early 2009. This game marks the official creation of the Storybook series moniker, retroactively making Secret Rings the first in said subseries. Right off the heels of 2008's Sonic Unleashed, with this game Sonic Team aimed for a greater focus on combat and cinematic presentation. Still being a Wii game and being more combat-oriented led the team to the logical conclusion of giving Sonic a sword. To accommodate this direction, the game is once again set in the Storybook world. No shit. This time being based off the legends of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Sonic is abruptly summoned to this world by a young female wizard who is being hunted by King Arthur and some of his underworld minions.
Oh, brave knight, swift as the wind, heed my call.
After deep-throating a chili dog, Sonic jumps into action and quickly dispatches the minions, but before he can turn his sights on King Arthur, he is stopped and whisked away by the young wizard. After escaping into the forest, the wizard introduces herself as Merlina and tells Sonic that they cannot defeat King Arthur in his current condition. He wields the magical scabbard of Excalibur, which makes him impervious to damage. Merlina tells Sonic that they need to find the sacred sword sleeping in the forest if they hope to have a chance at defeating King Arthur, and after receiving this drippy new glove, Sonic sets off to do just that. The gameplay is similar to Secret Rings, as it uses the same engine, but there are a few small changes and tweaks that make the game better overall. For starters, Sonic doesn't move forward automatically anymore. Instead, the game uses the nunchuck accessory for the Wii, which allows Sonic to move freely with an analog stick. On top of this, Sonic's base moveset is drastically improved from Secret Rings. He starts out with the backflip and landing dash, and by default he moves around a lot faster. The jump is now instantaneous, and while he still has the homing attack, it doesn't deal damage, it just acts as a way to close the distance between enemies quickly. Instead, Sonic uses his sword to deal damage to enemies. Swinging the Wii Remote makes Sonic swing his sword. By using it in the air, Sonic can do an aerial spin attack, and by pressing the Z button he can guard. These small tweaks to Sonic's moveset from Secret Rings go a long way to making the game easier and more fun to play. Every move in Sonic's arsenal is very quick and snappy. From jumping or stomping on the ground, and even the sword swings are quick to come out. A little ways into the game, you also unlock the Soul Surge, which is this game's equivalent to the Soul Gauge from Secret Rings. If you use it when there are no enemies around, it acts as a boost until you do encounter one, which then makes Sonic enter a slow motion state where you can hit the enemies one after the other. By swinging the sword when it flashes, you can do what's called a perfect strike, which not only increases the soul gauge, extending your time in Soul Surge, but also sounds really fucking cool. If you defeat multiple enemies in quick succession, a combo counter will appear at the top of the screen. Defeating multiple enemies quickly not only makes the number go up, but it also gives you a score multiplier depending on the given mission. The counter will go away if you take damage or wait too long between kills, but the time frame is pretty generous, and getting high combo counts is really satisfying. While the combat isn't deep by any stretch of the imagination, it's very fluid and keeps the fast pace Sonic is known for, and looks cool at the same time. Hell, the tutorial ends with you fighting a fucking dragon. How cool is that? Granted, he kinda just sits there and lets you wail on him for most of the fight, but how many games have you defeat a fucking dragon in the first few stages of the game? After searching the forest and finding the sacred sword, which goes by Caliburn by the way, Sonic pulls it out of the ground to find that it's actually sentient, as it starts to chastise Sonic for his lack of swordsmanship. Before they can argue for too long, however, they're interrupted by King Arthur.
Brace yourself, or I shall train you until you are worthy.
All right, Professor. Work your magic.
While this is technically the first boss fight in the game, it's kind of a stretch to call it one. It's more or less a quick-time event where you time your sword swings to King Arthur's, chasing him down in between each phase. It's not very difficult, it only lasts about 30 seconds. Despite giving him a good ass beating, King Arthur is unfazed by Sonic's attack as he recovers from all damage inflicted on him. Claiming Sonic is so worthless that there's no point in killing him, King Arthur retreats and leaves our heroes in the dust. Caliburn states that he needs to get his blade sharpened at the blacksmith, and before leaving, Sonic goes to talk to Merlina.
What are you gonna do, Merlina? Merlina? Hello?
Why do flowers bloom, knowing they are destined to wither?
Huh?
Their time of beauty is so short-lived.
After heading to the castle town and getting his blade sharpened by the blacksmith, Sonic searches for the Lady of the Lake, who gave King Arthur his magical scabbard and knows the secret to disarming it. After finding the Lady of the Lake, her name is Nemu by the way, she agrees to tell them the secret of the scabbard, but only if they can complete 3 trials for her. 1. Freeing the captives of King Arthur's dungeon, 2. Helping out some of the townsfolk, and 3. Defeating King Arthur's minions, the Knights of the Underworld. Having 3 days to complete their task, Sonic and Caliburn head out to complete each one. From here, the game opens up quite considerably. Like Secret Rings, Black Knight is also mission-based. The game is separated into various regions, such as the Misty Lake, Deep Forest, Camelot Castle, and so on, each with a varying amount of missions. I found it was a lot easier to tell which missions are required from regression. There's the standard reach the goal, defeat a certain number of enemies, collect rings, etc. But there are also certain objectives that are unique to this game. One objective sees you giving villagers collected rings through the simple QTE. While you don't get anything from it in the designated missions, if you do it in other missions, the villagers will give you items for your generosity. Later on in the game, you can unlock these stages that are reminiscent of earlier Sonic games, reskinned with traditional Sonic enemies and rings. There's 10 of these stages in total, and while they're extremely short, they're a cute little bonus for playing the extra missions in the game. At the end of each mission, you're ranked based on your score from 1 to 5 stars. I always thought it was cool that the music changes depending on your rank, similar to how it does in Sonic Unleashed. Your score also dictates how many followers you get at the end of a stage, and by getting enough of them you can increase your Twitter clout, night rank. By collecting stars and followers you can unlock a variety of different skills for Sonic. Unlike Secret Rings, you can't pick and choose which exact skills you want to use, but you can choose from a variety of sword styles to change your skill set. There's 3 sword styles in total. By default you have the balanced Knight style, but as you progress through the game you can unlock the attack-oriented Paladin style and the speed-oriented Cavalier style. You can level up each style by amassing stars with that style equipped, which gradually unlocks more skills for Sonic to use. I think this system works better than the one in Secret Rings, because most if not all of the skills are passive buffs that enhance Sonic's already balanced moveset. There's also no SP to worry about, so once you unlock a skill it's yours forever and you can use it immediately. Even without the SP system from Secret Rings, you can still somewhat influence Sonic's skills by equipping items you find during missions. Each stage has a variety of collectible items that can be found in chests, trading with villagers, or by defeating enemies. At the end of a stage, you can use identification points to reveal what each item is. There's over 200 items in the game to collect, ranging from books, swords, onion rings, burnt bread. While a lot of the items don't do anything, some of them you can equip to grant various buffs and even debuffs, if you're into that sort of thing. You fucking freak. The effects are pretty simple, from extra ID points to more rings when you start a stage, etc. Some items even change the music of a stage to fit a certain character, but I never really found a want to do that because all the music in this game slaps. The OST is one of my favorites in the entire series. Each level theme is iconic, and the variety of vocal tracks in the game live in my head rent-free. The presentation as a whole is the most unique out of any Sonic game. It takes the picture book aesthetic from the cutscenes of Secret Rings and dials it up to 11. Now everything has that aesthetic. such as the menus, the level select, and even cutscenes are improved from Secret Rings, this time being more animated and dynamic than they were before. Secret Rings was decent enough with the character writing at least, but this game takes it to another level. Being the last game for the majority of the 4Kids cast, they really knew their characters and knocked it out of the park. Jason Griffith's performance as Sonic and Shadow is iconic, and the first performances I think of when I think of these characters today. Outside of the performances, it's immediately obvious that the writers knew these characters like the back of their hands. From the very first cutscene of the game, you can just tell that they nailed Sonic, from his cocky and carefree nature to his desire to help those in need no matter the cost. It's just so perfect here. One of my favorite moments in the game is when Sonic decides to help out a little girl whose village was attacked by a dragon, despite knowing that doing so will mean he misses the 3-day window given to him by Nemu. The girl turns out to be Nemu in disguise, giving them an extra test, but it's still a perfect representation of what Sonic's character should be, helping people because he wants to, regardless of the consequences to himself. Speaking of the characters, you encounter each of the Knights of the Round Table throughout the game as they try to stop you along your journey. They consist of Lancelot, played by Shadow, Gawain, played by Knuckles, and Percival, being played by Blaze. Each time you encounter one, you're thrown into a one-on-one boss fight with them. While they mostly play out the same way, each knight has their own attacks that help keep themes fresh, even if they're mostly pretty easy and can be beaten in a matter of seconds if you know what you're doing. Later on in the game, you can even unlock a rematch against Lancelot, which is actually pretty difficult. But even then, it's pretty easy with some patience. The fight pales in comparison to the one against Percival, however, as it's easily the hardest boss I've played in any video game.
Now I shall test your skill, Sir Knight. Do you truly think you can match my swordsmanship?
After beating each knight, Sonic takes their sacred swords as the spoils of war, which some of the knights don't take very well.
To lose to a mere apprentice! I have been disgraced! Only death can remove this stain upon my honor!
Give me a break! What's up with all this drama?
After completing all of his trials, Sonic learns that the sacred swords are the key to dispelling King Arthur's immortality, and after acquiring all the swords, he heads to Avalon to deal with some unfinished business.
I'm Sonic the Hedgehog, Knight of the Wind. Let's settle this once and for all, King Arthur.
It seems your impersonation of a knight has improved somewhat.
I have you to thank for that.
Then let us have another look at that unsightly swordsmanship.
You're gonna be sorry you asked. This is it, old pal.
Indeed. Give it everything you have. Only then will you prevail.
Then bring it on, King Arthur!
The battle against King Arthur is one of my favorite moments in the entire game. You chase him down while he runs away on his horse and knock back his attacks to build up the soul gauge. After maxing it out, you can close the distance to jump on top of his horse, parry his sword swings, and then deal massive damage. It's pretty similar to the first boss against him, but he changes the timing on his sword swings to make it more interesting. You repeat it about 2 or 3 times to finish the fight. While the boss is very simple mechanically, the background music, Fight the Night, really ties the whole thing together, making it a very memorable moment. After kicking King Arthur's ass, he starts to gloat about his immortality again. With his guard down, Sonic takes the opportunity to dispel King Arthur's immortality and deal the final blow.
How can this be? No!
Yes! I did it!
What Sonic fails to realize is that using the power of all the sacred swords comes with a price. As the credits roll, Sonic dies and falls over to rot on the streets of Avalon. Just kidding. Like with Secret Rings, there's a fake out ending, and while I think both are weird as fuck, this one at least makes a little more sense than it did in Secret Rings. After killing King Arthur, he disappears in a puff of smoke, leaving behind only his scabbard. Meanwhile, Merlina is being cornered by the Knights of the Round Table. I don't know what they expect to accomplish without their weapons, but hey, good effort, guys. Sonic jumps in and hands her the scabbard, asking why King Arthur vanished like the rest of the Underworld Knights. To which Merlina reveals that King Arthur was an illusion the entire time.
Well done. And thank you, Sonic. With this scabbard, I can erase my grandfather's greatest mistake.
Oh no, Merlina is evil? No way! To the shock of literally no one, Merlina had evil intentions the entire time. I mean, come on, it was extremely obvious from the start. She's British. Merlina's magic causes the castle to crumble, and after narrowly escaping, the knights decide to combat Merlina by erecting a barrier around the castle to seal her magic. Sonic returns the sacred swords and the four knights split up to find the barrier stones scattered throughout the kingdom. The second half of the game is interesting because not only do you get to play as Sonic, but you also can play as any of the Knights of the Round Table as well. Each knight has their own moveset and soul surge. For example, Lancelot uses Chaos Control, Percival has a Fire Tornado, and Gawain just fucking hurls his swords at people. Sadly, you can only use the knights in these late game missions. They're denoted by a red symbol on the world map. While this is a really cool addition on paper, I found that playing as the other knights is a little lame in practice. Something I loved about playing as Sonic is the constant flow you can achieve by playing through each mission. On top of being fast, Sonic's attack rarely slow him down, meaning you can keep up the high-speed momentum and high combo counts the entire time. That's not to say the Knights of the Round Table are slow by any means, but their attacks tend to come out slower, and some even make you stop dead in your tracks. This could be an issue of just not having the right skills, as each knight can wield different weapons that change their attributes. You craft them in the blacksmith by using the items you've picked up throughout the game, but the material requirements are way too high. By the end of the post-game, I was only able to create 2 or 3 weapons, and that was only for one character. Even with these new weapons, I didn't really notice much of a difference. While the knights aren't awful to play as, I'd rather just play as Sonic, which thankfully is still an option.
This half of the game mainly consists of reskins of the other areas.
The snow area is pretty unique, but the others are pretty much the same, all things considered. Sonic does get to fight a real dragon this time though. It even fights back. It's nothing mind-blowing, but you can end the fight early if you know what you're doing, which is pretty cool. After finding and activating all the barrier stones, the barrier is created but is unfortunately too weak to contain Merlina's magic. Sonic decides to jump into the barrier and confront Merlina once and for all. Before starting their fight, Sonic asks Merlina what she's trying to accomplish, to which she tells him that she knows the fate of the storybook world. She knows that the world is fated to ruin by the hands of the very knights who protect it, so she wanted to preserve the world as it is now for all of eternity. Sonic, however, does not agree with this sentiment.
What good is a world that goes on forever?
My sorrow at its ruin runs deeper than the depths of the underworld.
Do you not understand?
No, and I don't want to!
Sonic attacks Merlina but is no match for her magic, and is about to be defeated by her when Caliburn steps in to block an incoming attack.
Caliburn!
You fool! Knight must always be on his guard!
This sends Sonic into a frenzy, which does nothing but wear him out even further.
Sir Sonic, you've done enough!
No, Sonic! There is no point in continuing! A knight never flees his foe, right?
You fool! This no longer has anything to do with chivalry! Get out of there! Run!
It was never about chivalry for me. I just gotta do what I've gotta do. That's all. Sonic!
A bright light suddenly engulfs Sonic, and with the help of the other sacred swords, he transforms into Excalibur Sonic. With his newfound strength, Sonic challenges Merlina to one final duel. The final boss fight against Merlina is eerily similar to the one from Secret Rings, even down to the background. Sonic deflects Merlina's attacks to recover his soul gauge, and then uses Soul Surge to close in and deal damage to Merlina directly. One thing I really like about this fight is that if you time your swings, you can get a chain of perfect hits that refills the soul gauge, meaning you can attack Merlina longer and finish the fight really quickly. I'm talking 30 seconds quick if you know what you're doing. Once again, the backing track for this fight is phenomenal. Instead of the main theme like it usually is, we get With Me, which reflects Merlina's thoughts during the fight as she both fights and argues with Sonic.
My eyes are filled with curiosity. You think that you have power over me. In this life, there's no room for you and me. So turn away your face and stay with
After dealing the final blow, Merlina's magic is dispersed, and Sonic gives Merlina some words of encouragement.
Merlina, every world has its end. I know that's kind of sad, but that's why we gotta live life to the fullest in the time we have. At least, that's what I figure.
Grandfather.
Playing these two games back to back made me remember why I fell in love with Sonic in the first place. Despite not being the greatest games, especially in the case of Secret Rings, they both have a unique character and charm that stuck with me even years after playing them for the first time. The music, the characters, the willingness to try new ideas, these are all things that I miss from this era of Sonic. Recently, Sonic has been all over the place quality-wise. While I think Forces and Colors Ultimate are at best decent games, there's no denying that they don't come anywhere close to the quality of the games that came before it. They're missing the charm and ambition that both the best and worst Sonic games have in droves. With the massive success of both the Sonic movies and Origins, things are looking up for the Blue Fuck. Sega seems pretty confident in the newest installment, even if its reveal has been a shit show to say the least. Here's hoping they can recapture the magic of the character that I and many others fell in love with as Sonic runs into new frontiers.